Hi, and welcome to another episode of Chronic Risk, the voice of the NCRMA, the National Cannabis Risk Management Association. I'm your host, Alex Herding, the Chief Risk Management Officer for the organization. See, I already messed that up. See, come together. Sorry, we're going to start over. All right. Hello, and welcome to another Chronic Risk episode. Jeez, oh my goodness. I need to... All right, hello and welcome to another episode of Chronic Risk, the voice of the NCRMA, the National Cannabis Risk Management Association. I'm your host, Alex Herding, the Chief Risk Management Officer for the organization. Thank you for joining us. Chronic Risk is a podcast that gives you insight on risk in the cannabis industry from the NCRMA's partners, memberships, and affiliates. Today, we are joined by somebody that can provide us insight into how to plan for disasters. My guest is David Mistick. Hello and welcome, David. How are you?
Great. How are you today?
Good. David has more than 30 years experience in property management, construction, disaster planning, and recovery. He has managed and consulted on disasters throughout the U.S. David is a certified property manager and certified business resilience manager. He speaks regularly at restoration and insurance industry events and is an accredited continuing education instructor in 5 states. He is the president of Circumspex, which is a web-based platform for developing comprehensive response and recovery plans. Circumspex bridges the gaps between business and emergency response, making the most comprehensive yet easy to use planning product on the market today. It stores your entire plan online so you can update and retrieve it anywhere. For more information, you can find it at circumspex.com. That's CIRCUMSPEX.com. We at the NCRMA are excited about our new course in our NCRM Academy, which is the continuing planning, I'm going to start that over. We at the NCRMA are excited about the new course in our NCRM Academy, which is Continuity Planning for the Cannabis Industry, a course developed by David Mistick, and it can be found at ncrma.net/NCRM Academy. David, so how has this year's hurricane season been like for somebody in the disaster planning industry?
It's been a little bit more than what you could really imagine it could be. So it's been rather overwhelming, and it's just seemed to keep on coming. And I tell you, traveling through the Gulf region for the last several months, working on a variety of projects, your heart goes out to everyone who's suffered multiple times here. And, you can see the strengths of folks who, from a business side, have had some form of preparation or at least been able to muster a better response. So as always, you see it across the broad spectrum of impacts to people.
Yeah, it's been a big year. So, Dave, tell me why should businesses plan? What are the benefits of disaster and continuity planning?
Well, at the heart of it, really, it's all about protecting people, property, profits, and products along the path. And it seems like it's such just a straightforward, factual, ought to be like the foundation of anybody's business plan in terms of protecting what you have and being able to continue on after an event. But, for decades now, a variety of people have been evangelists on this topic from the business side, encouraging people to be better prepared, warning about the disconnects. And really the predominant, if I had to pick one word that describes the typical business owner's view of continuity planning or disaster planning, would really revolve around denial. Folks just feel like, well, that's something that happens to the people in Florida, or that's something that happens to people in California with the wildfires. Well, the reality is, if you look at the statistics over the last 20 years, the instances of disasters, both man-made, technological, weather-related, are increasing dramatically. And for some businesses, there's been a hesitation because it would seem to not be a necessarily income producing part of the business. And in reality, the return on investment for disaster planning is maybe something that isn't seen every day, but when a disastrous event occurs, that ROI becomes readily apparent. And I think one of the clear validations of that point this year have been the number of folks for whom we have done proposals in the last several years who for one reason or another have chose not to go forward with them. And now suddenly, between what the pandemic has wrought and what Mother Nature has wrought, there seems to be suddenly much greater appreciation for not only being prepared, as I said, but being able to maintain and survive and really thrive. And I think that that last part of thriving is often underappreciated, but those who can come back in business and be able to stand up and keep going will achieve a competitive advantage against others in the marketplace from being better able to serve and be back in normal operations.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. Yeah, denial. I can see that being a big reason why people wouldn't plan. Is that the sole reason, or do you know of any other factors why people wouldn't plan? Because it seems so obvious that you would want.
It does seem so obvious, and for some folks, it's a matter of really making a decision to commit the time or money to do it. Because again, it isn't necessarily something that's producing dollars and getting a return. So people tend to look at it as an expense, as rather to something that is an income or productivity enhancement to them. Number two, we see people who intend to plan, have the best intentions for it, but never manage to get it out of the gate. And we have a person who remain nameless who for 5 years calls every fourth quarter and says, it's on my list for next year. I'm committed to get it done in the first 90 days, and then it tends to roll over. So when a company, no matter how big or how small, decides that they want to get involved in planning, it's very important that they assign what we like to call a champion, but someone who's going to be, I'm responsible. I'm the guy, I'm the woman, I'm the person who's going to make it happen. And they have enough wherewithal, either as the manager or a person who's deigned to have that position, to really push the project and make it happen. Because there's always a million reasons why we can't. I think behind that is that when you look at the issues to be addressed in the business continuity plan, it can really be a little overwhelming. And so people look at it and go, God, when am I going to have time? And it's so involved. And over the years, we've really helped companies to break the plan down into a series of manageable events. A lot of times with companies, we'll break the planning process into 6, 8, 10, 12 different manageable modules to work on with them and their staff in developing a plan. Because it's really goes back to that old analogy, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? It's very much the same thing here. You've got to break it into manageable parts and identify what you're going to need to successfully prepare that part of the plan, identify who has the data or information to populate it and build it, then move on to the next. And then it really, at the end of the process, it becomes a matter of testing and maintaining the program in the long run to be successful.
Very interesting. So when you're planning for disasters, what are the main pillars that you take into consideration when you do that?
So the key elements of any business continuity or disaster plan really revolve around risk assessment, number one, trying to look at your business in its particular location. What are the most likely risks that can occur? and then looking at how often in a given year or a given number of years might they occur. So, we'll have clients who want to deal with like exotic, crazy, once in a lifetime risks. And we really try to focus and say, okay, you have this business and you're a mile and a half from the river, or you're X number of miles from the power plant, or you have a chemical plant that's 3 blocks. What are the things that are impacting your business every day? Natural, man-made, technological, that can put you at risk. So A is identifying what those risks are. B then is how do you manage those risks? Are there things you can do to lessen that exposure? Are there things that you can do to eliminate that exposure? Is there nothing you can do and you just say, well, this is the hand that we're dealt, it's too expensive or time consuming to address it? Or do we buy insurance and essentially transfer that risk? So risk assessment is really at the core of any business continuity and disaster plan. And once you identify those risks, we then look at what will each of those risks mean for us in terms of business interruption. If, for example, the town that you're in has a flood and you're not able to open the doors on your retail operation for 3 or 4 days, or if there is a snowstorm and nobody can get into work for X number of days, how do each of those impact the time that you may be down and out of service? And then once you realize what that time period is, it's really a simple base calculation to say, well, if each day my retail operation is bringing me $3,500 of net revenue, I'm going to be down for 4 days. That's an easy calculation to make. Or if production, we're not moving this out of the facility, we're losing X number of dollars a day or even an hour in calculations. We work for clients who their downtime was calculated in the hundreds of thousands of dollars per hour. So when you look at the risks and what the extent of them may be and translate that to dollars, that really helps to give you a pecking order for determining how you want to manage or address your risks based on what is the most outstanding financial exposure to the organization. And from that then will lead you to strategy development. How are we going to organize to do this? How are we going to assign roles and responsibilities in the organization? That then comes together in the overall plan development. And really, again, then it's a function of testing the plan and maintaining the plan. And the test doesn't have to be some crazy mad cap exercise that shuts the business down for half a day while you're testing it. There are a lot of simple testing, tabletop exercises, checklist exercises that can go through the process and make you consider the issues. And lastly, just talk about maintenance issues for a bit. On a very regular basis, we visit people who think they have put together some type of continuity or disaster response plan. And probably one of the best stories or recollections I have about it was we were doing some consulting for a group of hospitality hotel chain operators. And we were once meeting with the facility manager and the group manager, and they said, well, look, Dave, we've been planning forever. It's inbred in our DNA. And the guy reaches on the shelf and he pulls over 3 binders full of information. And my eyes are kind of getting ready to roll over in the back of my head, because the harder you make it to put the plan, the more cumbersome, the less likely you are to use it. And so I asked the facility fellow, I said, well, let's look at your roles and responsibilities in the plan. Let me kind of see your chart and cross-references this. And he goes to that part in one of the binders and opens it up. And the manager looks at the list and he says, well, he said, by my calculation, probably 30 to 40% of the people who have responsibility no longer work here. And he said, some of these people probably haven't worked here for 3 or 4 years. And so that you set yourself up for failure if you're not at least doing the basics every year to make sure that you're current and the information's meaningful, and it reflects changes in the business, whether you may have added a location, deleted a location, added new machinery or equipment, have more people working in a specific site. So those are all variables that sort of impact the vitality and the effectiveness of the plan.
Very interesting. Yeah, that all makes a lot of sense. And I know you mentioned this a little earlier, a little bit about 2020, and it just seems like there's been one disaster after another this whole year. But what has this pandemic taught us about the relevance of disaster planning? Because I think it's really kind of put disaster planning up front more than it has in the past.
Well, I think that it's brought home the point that everybody is susceptible, and we all have exposures. We may have exposures to different degrees to that risk, but it's really, I think, caused businesses, no matter whether you're manufacturing or production or the sales end of the business, the retail end of the business, but it's made people pause to really understand what are the core linkages in their business, both upstream in their organization and downstream in the organization, and understand that you can't just look in your little silo. They're really, you're all intertwined, and understanding how what seems like maybe a minuscule interruption in some other part of the business can have huge impacts across other legs of the organization. So, I've had many times business owners or managers tell us that, at the end of the process, say, Dave, the product is great. We think we've put together a really, really good plan. People have bought into it. But they tell us that they've often felt that the most meaningful part of the process was drilling down to understand the linkages and to get people to understand the contributions and the essential elements in different parts of the business, and whether those elements are personnel or ability to communicate or a particular piece of equipment, that there are, it's those weak links in the chain that often go overlooked. And when you really start peeling back the onion in doing the continuity plan, you understand those linkages better. They become exposed. And to that extent, I want to go back again to talk about, having a champion in the organization kind of leads the process. It's important that the people who have either be conscripted into doing the plan or willfully come forward and want to work on building the plan, that they understand that there is not some doomsday judgmental moment for them, especially in the testing phase. And when we put these plans together and we want to run them through tests, we want to see where it fails. We want to see where those weak links are. And so people need to be assured that, hey, this last test, it really screwed up. You're not going to get fired over this. We want to shine a light on it. We want to understand what our exposure is, how to make ourselves more resilient to it. And so the person who is really directing the plan needs to create that sense of the importance of identifying failures and weak links. And it's not a terrible thing. That's what the process is. You don't want to discover that when you're in the midst of some fire, flood, hurricane, tornado, and then it's too late. And then you've exposed everybody. So, and one additional item I think important to talk about is relates to employees, is that when people think about the benefits of the disaster planning, and we talk about people, we're talking about protecting people at that particular moment in time or with a particular disaster. And that's sort of an obvious point. But a less obvious piece of the puzzle is for organizations to realize that if they are impacted by a disaster and unable to continue in business for some particular period of time, losing key staff may be more expensive than a whole lot of other expenses that they're having. When you think about the time, the money, the training in any organization to have your key personnel in whatever part of the business, what's that real cost to you if your business goes down because of an event and you're unable to open for a month, for 2 months, for 3 months? And I think part of the pandemic has helped us think about and realize that piece wholeheartedly this year of, it's not being able to keep those people employed and keep money flowing to them can have huge ripple effects downstream.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, we had the National Cannabis Risk Management Association obviously deal a lot with insurance. Can you explain how continuity planning ties into insurance and the underwriting process?
Sure. Absolutely. We encourage people to consider the benefits of planning on their insurance program and really their risk profiles, because having a good plan put together and exercised and maintained will limit the extent of your loss, of a particular loss, both in terms of the potential timeline that a business experiences a disruption, as well as the dollar amount and the severity of that disruption. So whether it's being able to bring your online business systems and applications back up quicker to minimize downtime, or getting a building back in operation again after a fire, a flood, or a hurricane, those are all big numbers that add up in almost in an exponential manner. So I think it's very important. One of the things that we work on all the time with our clients is, in terms of protecting the property side of the business, is that we encourage them to develop service agreements with restoration contractors who are used to putting buildings back together again after particular events, and to vet these people in advance and understand what they can bring to the table to help you out. What training do they have? What education background do they have? What is their competency in terms of the number of people or the types of equipment? And last but not least, to understand what is their contract and what is the billing process. Because if I had $1 for every time in 40 years I stood in the middle of the night with somebody while their business was burning to the ground or the water was rising through their production facility, and that sense of helplessness that they have. And you would never, think of it like this. You would never dial up a remodeling contractor at 2:30 in the morning and say, hey, I'd like to spend $250,000 with you to do a little addition. Why don't you drop by and bring over a contract that I've never looked at and let me sign my life away. Right. So preparing, vetting, knowing who you're dealing with, knowing what their contract terms are, understanding what their hourly rates are, that's all protection. That's good planning. It's key to protecting yourself. And I think that for the cannabis industry, it's important also that you engage a contractor who understands the issues for your business, who's not going to come in and change the environment in your growing facilities and either increase mold production or go to the other extreme and have extreme deprivation of moisture in there, or to have somebody show up and use chemicals that aren't food grade chemicals and contaminate the product. So, and I think that the wildfires, I know you and I have talked a bunch about them over the last several months. but understanding the contamination from fire to the products. And the
Absolutely.
difference about whether or not you're next to a national forest that's burned and what that spreads to your product, as opposed to being on the outskirts of downtown and you've had 3 department stores, 2 maintenance facilities, a food distribution center, and that just that soup of kind of toxic mess of building materials and products that are other people. How are they going to impact your facility, your product, and whether it's simply a perceived, oh, how it looks, or understanding the contaminants and how to remove those contaminants. And, and there are people out there using some pretty interesting technology that's been used in the restoration side for a long time with ozone processes and things. But having a good plan, having a partner in the restoration contractor who knows the questions to help you ask. Nobody knows the business better than you, the cannabis owner, grower, retailer knows your business, but they can bring the questions to the table that they've seen occur in others folks' business to help you broaden your sense of what your risk is and what your solutions could be.
Wow. Yeah, that's great. And I think this industry, yeah, if it wasn't aware of all the disasters that are out there before 2020, I think they're aware of it now. Like you said, with the fires, the pandemic, civil unrest, and the explosions that you have in these extraction facilities. I think there's a lot that cannabis businesses need to be prepared for. And I think this is all just excellent information. And
Well,
I think, yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead,
No,
Alex.
no, no. I wanted you to finish your thought there.
No, I think that we were talking for a second about the explosions. I think
Yeah.
one of the other important pieces of the planning process is to engage your local first responders. It's very important for them to understand what's going on at your facility. And I understand there may be some people out there who think there's a benefit because they're somehow under the radar, but the risk and the liability that you take on for not engaging and having those people understand what's going on there, it puts you in a situation where you may think you have risk to cover, but you may have put yourself in a position that's beyond your coverage by not identifying what you have, not being insured properly, not letting the first responders understand the risks that they're getting into. So I've seen that firsthand, not in the cannabis side, but in other chemical production sides. And it's a very ugly, litigious movie that only ends with the lawyers being successful.
Oh boy, that's never a good scenario. Let's only get the lawyers out when we need them, and if we can prevent that, I think that's what cannabis businesses would want. Wow, this has been a lot of very good information. I really believe that what you're putting out here today and what you've developed in the course that we're given through our NCRM Academy, I really think can give the cannabis business owner and operator just the tools to prepare for when things go bad. And if you didn't think things could go bad before 2020, I think your opinions may have changed by now. So Dave, thank you for your time and joining us. We really appreciate you coming on today. To find out more about David Mistick and Circumspex, visit circumspex.com. That's CIRCUMSPEX.com. And everyone that found this podcast informative should go ahead and take our course, Continuity Planning for the Cannabis Industry, developed by yours here, by Dave here. And that can be found at ncrma.net/NCRM Academy. We'd like to thank all the listeners for taking time out of the day to join us. Thanks.
Alex, thanks. It's been great.
Dave. Stay safe out there. All right.